It feels like America's moving in that direction. You know, it wants less and less of its history, wants less and less context. You look what's happening with textbooks. Places like Florida, they want to ban textbooks or cut out the parts of the textbooks that have slavery in the books. And now parents are fighting. They're like, oh, no, take the slavery out. It's making the kids feel bad.
Trevor Noah, the comedic genius with the sharpest tongue in the late-night world, set his sights on JD Vance. And what followed was nothing short of a political earthquake. The clash that ensued wasn't just a comedic roast. It was a brilliant expose of the hypocrisy, betrayal, and political transformations that have defined the landscape of modern American politics. If you've been keeping track of JD Vance, you know that his journey from outsider to Trump loyalist is a fascinating, yet disheartening story. Once hailed as a champion for the working class, the voice of rural America, Vance appeared to be the breath of fresh air that the American political system desperately needed. His best-selling book, Hillbilly Elegy, catapulted him to fame, making him the go-to figure to understand the struggles of the Rust Belt. He spoke to the heartache of working-class Americans, focusing on the erosion of communities, the collapse of American industry, and the disillusionment that had gripped blue-collar workers. His rise seemed destined to disrupt the political establishment, a bold intellectual outsider who had found his place in the thick of things. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. Fast forward to today, and JD Vance is no longer the outsider he once claimed to be. In fact, he has become one of the most prominent members of the MAGA movement. His political transformation has been nothing short of breathtaking, yet tragically predictable. Vance, once a fierce critic of Donald Trump and his divisive rhetoric, is now one of the former president's most loyal allies. The very man who called Trump a cultural cancer has become Trump's personal cheerleader, parroting Trump's talking points with a zeal that can only be described as fervent loyalty. And this is where Trevor Noah enters the scene, with his signature blend of wit and intellect, to expose Vance's political about-face. When Noah took the stage to roast Vance, it wasn't just another jab at a politician. It was a surgical takedown that laid bare the hypocrisy of the man who had once positioned himself as the voice of reason, but had since sold out for power. In a single segment, Noah didn't need to invent any new scandalous facts about Vance. He simply held up a mirror to Vance's own contradictions, and the result was explosive. Noah's take? Vance, the man who once called Trump a dangerous figure, had now become Trump's loyal foot soldier. The Yale law graduate, who had once criticized Trump's moral bankruptcy and divisiveness, was now embracing the very person he had condemned. The irony of it all was staggering, but Noah's brilliance lay in his ability to expose this hypocrisy in a way that was both funny and biting. It wasn't just a flip-flop. It was a complete betrayal of the very values Vance had once espoused, and Noah didn't hold back. But what made this roast more than just a routine comedic jab was the political charge it carried. Noah wasn't just mocking Vance's personal transformation. He was shedding light on the deeper ideological chaos that plagues the Republican Party. In many ways, Vance's flip-flop was a symptom of a much larger issue: the willingness of many politicians to betray their core principles for the sake of political power. This was no longer just about left versus right. It was about loyalty without integrity, power without principle, and performance over truth. And that truth, laid bare by Noah's words, cut to the heart of everything that's wrong with the political establishment. Naturally, this kind of truth-telling didn't sit well with Donald Trump, who has always had a fragile ego when it comes to being mocked. In true Trumpian form, the former president reportedly lost his cool, stomping around Mar-a-Lago like a bull in a china shop. It wasn't the joke itself that bothered Trump, it was the truth behind it. The fact that someone like Vance, who once considered him dangerous and morally bankrupt, had now become a willing participant in the MAGA machine was a painful reminder of the hypocrisy that lies at the core of the movement. In typical Trump fashion, he didn't sit idly by. According to sources, Trump reached out to Vance directly, assuring him that he was still his favorite foot soldier. The call wasn't just an act of reassurance. It was an attempt to reassert control over the narrative, to remind Vance who held the power. And as for Trevor Noah, Trump couldn't resist taking a few shots at the late-night host, accusing comedians of being the real threat to democracy. It was a classic move by Trump, attacking those who dare to mock him while simultaneously deflecting from the reality of his own weaknesses. And as always, the MAGA world responded with outrage. Conservative influencers and diehard Trump supporters took to social media, launching a full-scale attack on Trevor Noah for daring to expose their beloved political figure. They accused him of being part of the so-called deep state, as if mocking hypocrisy was some sort of grand conspiracy. In reality, Noah had done something that few others in the political world had the courage to do. He had exposed the absurdity of Vance's transformation in a way that was sharp, insightful, and hilarious. Of course, JD Vance wasn't about to let the roast slide without putting up a fight. In a desperate attempt to save face, Vance issued a public statement pretending that he didn't care about what comedians thought. He dismissed Noah's roast as nothing more than a cheap shot and claimed that it didn't bother him. But the very fact that he felt compelled to respond, especially in such a lengthy and defensively worded statement, made it clear that the roast had hit a nerve. As Vance fumbled to spin his narrative, it became increasingly evident that Noah's words had struck at the heart of a much larger issue. Because when a comedian can provoke this kind of reaction, when a single joke can cause a political figure to lose his composure, there's something deeper going on. The roast wasn't just about JD Vance. It was about the broader political culture of opportunism and betrayal that has taken hold of both parties in America. What made this moment even more potent was the public reaction. Twitter exploded with memes and hashtags, and late-night comedians jumped on the bandwagon, amplifying Noah's critique of Vance across social media. The roast wasn't just a passing joke. It became a rallying cry, a call-out of everything wrong with the political elite. It resonated with everyday Americans who are tired of the same old performance politics, the endless back and forth that never seems to result in meaningful change. As the backlash raged on, JD Vance desperately tried to reframe the situation, positioning himself as a victim of unfair political attacks. But no amount of spin could hide the glaring truth that Trevor Noah had so masterfully exposed. Vance's transformation from outsider to Trump loyalist was not a mere change of heart. It was a complete abandonment of the values he had once championed. And in this moment, when the public was watching, that transformation became a symbol of the wider collapse of authenticity in American politics. Noah didn't just roast Vance. He detonated the carefully constructed illusion that so many politicians, from Vance to Trump and beyond, have spent years building. He didn't need to exaggerate the truth. He simply pointed out the glaring contradictions and hypocrisies that were already on display. And in doing so, he reminded us all that sometimes it's the comedians who are the true truth-tellers in the room, the ones who can expose the cracks in the facade that others refuse to acknowledge. So what's next in this political saga? If this meltdown is any indication, it's just the beginning. With the MAGA world in full panic mode and Vance scrambling to defend his newfound loyalty to Trump, one thing is for sure. Trevor Noah has set the stage for a political showdown. The question now is whether Vance, Trump, and the rest of the political elite will continue to play the game of power without principle, or whether they'll eventually have to face the truth about the real nature of their political allegiances. And as always, it's the comedians who get the last laugh.